Hello everyone, this is the 3D Tinkerer, and today I'm going to be teaching you the basics of the new Blender 2.0 interface, and then later on we'll be making some models together in this program. So if you're completely new to Blender, this first video is going to be very crucial, but if you've kind of used Blender for a while, you could probably skip past this video. This is going to be going over the very basics, so unless you really want to relearn most of the interface, you could probably skip ahead. So today I'm going to be going over the very basics of just the interface to kind of get you situated, because although 2.8 is very user-friendly, or it's more user-friendly over its previous versions, it still can be a bit confusing if you don't know where everything is. So yeah, so right now I'm in a brand new startup file of Blender. So when you start out, you have a cube, a camera, this is what this little thing is over here, and a light source. It's just a point light, kind of similar to a light bulb. So right off the bat, we're going to be talking about camera control. So to move the camera in this spot right here, which is called the 3D viewport, you can see it right here. You use the middle mouse button, and when you click and hold and move your mouse, you rotate around the selected object. It doesn't always, when you select a different object, it won't automatically make that the new camera like selected object, so we'll talk about that later. But just remember for now, middle mouse, press and slide, and that's how you move around. Next, if you want to actually pan the camera, hold down shift and then press middle mouse, and then that gives you a panning option, so you can kind of reposition yourself by mixing both the general rotation and the panning. So that's very easy. Next is actually recentering the camera. So say like you were working on something over here and it still isn't really rotating the way you'd want it to. It's a bit buggy. You're going to want to select the object and switch that camera center point. So the way you select in Blender 2.8 by default is with the left click, like most programs. If you're coming from older versions of Blender, right click used to be the basic. But that is no longer the default. If you want to change that, you got to go to Preferences by going to Edit and Preferences, and then you go to Key Mat, and then you can change Select Width to right. But I'm going to be sticking with default settings so it's easier to follow along. So, anyways, to recenter, you click an object, and you'll note selected when it's glowing orange like this. And if you press period on the numpad, it will recenter the camera. So see how it zoomed in there? And now when I rotate around this point, you can see that it is now like the selected camera object. So I'm going to select the cube and hit period, and see now it's selected, and I can zoom in and out by using the scroll wheel if you haven't figured that out already. So yeah, pretty easy camera controls. Moving on, we're going to be talking more about this 3D space. So there's several options for moving objects around. Right now we're in what's called object mode, so you can't actually edit any of the 3D geometry of the shapes or anything like that. So anyways, in Blender 2.8, they made it very easy to jump into these new settings and tweaks without getting confused, because it used to be most of your options for tweaking objects and stuff would be in a big old list on the left, but now they made it these easy little buttons with nice little UI icons. So let's just kind of go through them real quick. So by default, it's select box. So you can see if I click and hold down left click, I can make a selection box and it'll select all the objects. If I want to deselect all the objects, I'm going to hold down Alt and hit A, and that will deselect everything. If I wanted to select everything without using a big old box, I can just press A once and it'll select everything. So A to select everything. If you double tap A, it'll also deselect, or you can press the Alt A to just get it cleared up like that. So next one is the 3D cursor. So this is this little circle thing right here. Although it used to be a pain, you slowly learned how to use it properly in Blender. It's basically just a point where you can use to tweak objects with various settings, but we're not going to be talking about that too much. Just know that if you have this right here selected, you can click around the viewport and you'll move around that 3D cursor. And it's a bit weird about where it places it, but if you select objects, usually it kind of like casts it like a ray cast onto where you select the object. So for example, if I select the top corner, it'll place it on that top corner, bottom corner, stuff like that, if you can kind of see that. So don't worry about the 3D cursor too much right now, just know that it exists, and it's kind of a tool that you can use to change things around later on. So next is the transform option. So when you have this enabled, when you select an object, it'll give you all these different dials for moving the object around. This one is labeled just transform, so this gives you all the options. You can move it up and down, you can rotate it, and you can scale it. But you might not want to do all of those, so I'm going to reset it all real quick. So for example, if you just wanted to move it, you can go down here and you'll see just the arrows are selected. So now you can click and hold, and if you select the blue one, it'll only go up in the y-axis, or sorry, the z-axis. You can see over here it has the different labels. So blue, the up and down is the z-axis. Here's the y and the x, and these are very helpful for moving your objects around in the scene later on if you need to. I'm going to hit Alt-G to reset the location of the cube. And then here's rotation. You can see it just rotates it. And you have to be careful. So if you just grab this white ring, it'll kind of rotate based off where your camera is. But if you grab a colored one like red, it'll rotate around the X or the Y respectively. So, and for this one, if you hit Alt-R, it'll reset the rotation. So Alt-G to reset the actual physical location of it. So Alt-G. And if I rotated the object, Alt-R is to reset the rotation. And then also scale, obviously, so if you want to scale the object, you can just do that. Same thing, it has locking axes. And also with the scale, it's a bit different. If you click these little in-between things right here, it'll scale in both directions. So in this case, if you select the red one, it'll scale in both the Z and the Y, but it'll leave the red line out, which is the X. So you can kind of see that. Notice how those other lines are, see how the up and down lines are highlighted. So scale. And again, Alt-S to reset that. And next you have the annotate. I haven't personally had much time to use this. It's basically, I think it's just like the grease pencil kind of remodified. We're not going to be really using that too much in this tutorial. If you want to learn about doing 3D stuff in Blender, I'll probably have to make more videos on that. But I'm not too familiar with it myself. But apparently 2.8 is great for artists. So yeah, basically you have annotate, you can kind of just draw around, and like if you need to make notes, I guess. I'm sure it has many other uses, but I personally haven't had to use it too much. Last but not least, you have measure. Pretty self-explanatory. You can measure the distance between 2 points. This usually isn't too necessary unless you want to work with like 3D printing, or if you want to make an architecture scene and you have to get the doorways and such just right. It's not too big of a deal. So moving on, what time are we at? We're at about 7 minutes. Okay. I'm going to reset this all real quick. Moving on, we have a lot more to talk about the 3D view space. So it's a little bugged out up here. That might be a Blender 2.8 bug. Anyways, there's a lot of options on the top here, so we're going to kind of quickly go through those. So we're going to ignore this one right now because that's about more than just the 3D viewport. But right here we have different mode selects. So for example, we can change the mode. So right now we're in object mode, which is specifically for just moving objects around and such, or cameras, etc. But if we wanted to edit an object, which we're not going to worry about that right now, but just to show you, if I click here and hit edit, you can see we have a whole all these different tools, and the cube change. You can now see the vertices and select them. And you see if I start moving things around, it can get a little weird, and we're not going to worry about that for right now. But the edit mode is very important, edit and object mode. And instead of clicking up here, you can easily switch between the two by just pressing tab. So you'll notice all that went away and I'm back in object mode. So just hitting tab. And don't worry if you can't remember all these keybinds. I'll be trying to audibly talk about them when we're modeling later on. You see right here we have view. So these 4 buttons right here, and it varies whether if you're in edit or object mode. If you ever wanted to change something about your object or about something in the scene, it's probably going to be up here in the top. For example, view, you can come down to cameras and you can set active object as camera, active camera. There's all these different options relating to the view, so it's pretty self-explanatory. I personally haven't had to tweak any of these in here, just kind of be aware that they're here. You can do viewport render, so you'll render an image, but you can do it over here as well. So again, I don't really use this too much. And for perspective and orthographic, I usually use the number pad for this. But we'll be talking about that later on. Select. This is all about how you select objects. So, for example, if you click All here, you'll notice it'll do what we did before by pressing A. I'm going to hit Alt-A to deselect it again. And again, you see it actually labels the hotkey right here. It says A. And if you want nothing selected, you can hit Alt-A. Invert, so if you want to select everything but what's already selected, if you hit I, was that Alt-I, I believe? Let me double check. Control-I. So if you hit Control-I, it'll invert the selection. Box select. So if you, again, I use hotkeys for this. So if you press B, it'll bring up this crosshair. So you can click and drag and you can select all the objects. Or you could select it here and notice how it pops up. Again, with the hotkeys, there's a lot of hotkeys you get used to. Circle select, you can select things with this little circle here. It's pretty useful. Again, there's a hotkey for it. You can see. And there's a few others we're not going to worry about. This is pretty helpful. Select by type and select active camera, etc. Select random if you needed that for any reason. Anyways, just kind of keep in mind this is here. So if you ever need to worry about selecting, look here first. Add, this is for adding new objects to the scene. So if we wanted to make a new object and then model off of it, we can go up here and click add, and you see there's a bunch of options. Usually you just have to worry about mesh and camera and light. Obviously there's some more fine tools if you want to make like wires with curves and stuff, but we're not going to worry about that too much. Just know if you want to add an object, you can come up here, or you can just press Control or Shift A, and that'll also bring up this menu anywhere. So if you want to add a quick cube, you can go here, and then see I added another cube. So again, don't worry about it too much. We're going to be going over it all. Here, this is for different methods of manipulating objects. So you have like global transform, local transform, normals, gimbal. We're not going to worry about that too much. Vertex snapping, again, don't got to worry about it too much. Proportional editing, if you want to move things with an influence of like a circular proportion, which again sounds kind of confusing, you see, but we'll go over that later. So right here, pivot point, you can change if you want to go around the 3D cursor, origins, again, we're going to come back to it. Visibility, so if you want to hide objects, collection objects, etc. This is if you want to hide certain objects, so like we can hide meshes, or say you want to hide cameras so your viewport's less cluttered. You can hit camera right here and it'll get rid of the camera. It's just kind of helpful if you need to tidy everything up. Overlays, this is just kind of like all the fine things in your scene. Say you don't want to show the grid here, you can turn it off so it's a bit cleaner. For sculpting and whatnot, you can turn off certain axes. Just a lot of stuff to edit the actual viewport. Whole scene transparent, if you want to be able to see through objects and stuff, you can do that. Wireframe here, you can change things to wireframe. Solid view, and then there's also textures and rendered view, but that's going to lag my computer, so we're not going to mess with that. Perspective and orthographic. Toggle camera, if you want to switch to the actual view of the camera right there. You can also select axes, etc. So there's a lot of things in the 3D viewport. So we've only covered the very basics, but the main thing you want to take away from this is that although it's complicated, you can pick up the hotkeys pretty quick, so you don't really have to mess with many of these menus. And there's also a very helpful search option. If you just press F3, it'll bring up a search. So that was just the 3D viewport. So in the next video, we're going to be spreading out a bit. We're going to be talking about how Blender handles these windows, like what does this properties window right here do, or this properties window do right here, and you know how we can actually see all the objects in our scene, etc., timelines. So you've just finished your first intro to Blender. This was the 3D viewport, so stick with it, and trust me, 3D rendering is a lot of fun. So thanks for watching, and please stick with it, because trust me, it's confusing now, but once you get these renders popping out, it gives you the motivation to keep going. So thanks for watching. Leave a comment if you had a concern or any problems, and have a good day.